because this is not the bridge that was built when the road was built back in about 1830. The bridge that was here was swept away by a huge flood in 1931. Took out this bridge, the Divana Bridge, and the Cuckoo Bridge was the next one down again. And what had happened, the monks' fish pool, which was up the valley towards Buckasani, had survived, unbelievably, all that time. Thomas Wilson, around 1830, had repaired it, raised the level of it a bit, so there was a nice monk's fish pool, and it is a genuine monk's fish pool, as opposed to a number of others around here which are called monk's pools but aren't. Great stuff. I don't know whether it had a lot of rain in 1931, but anyway, the dam burst and a great torrent came down, and this fish pool is about 2 miles away, up into the hills, and rushed down here. The bridge by my house, which we call the school bridge, escaped, which was fine. Because it's a super bridge. It's a lovely feature to have in your garden, really. You pay tens of thousands for it from one of these gardening experts. But it came on down here, took this bridge out and the next two. So climate problems are not new in the landscape, and certainly caused a bit of damage here. And it's the only time within memory that there was any record of extensive flooding right across this valley. We do get some flooding still, but not on that sort of scale. So that's why the bridges have changed. What I really came down to look at is the long, low building, which you see in front of us. We can probably walk up a little bit. And this part of the village is known as Frogtown. Nobody knows why. But the building itself we know as Tradesmen's Row. And that dates again from the late 1820s, when Thomas Wilson was building up his estate here. And it was, what he was trying to do was improve the estate, which had been in serious decline over the Fowler's ownership, which started really in the middle of the 18th century. And so there had been a long 60, 70 year period of decline, really serious decline. And at that time, in the early years of the 19th century, farming was buoyant. While farming was picking up, we'd had the Napoleonic Wars, there was great demand for food and so on. And so farming was good, and people with money who were coming from towns. Wilson wasn't a farmer, he was a barrister, but he had money to put into the land, and that was seen as a good investment. And they were called, always known as improvers. He employed somebody called Leighton Cook, who was really a land agent, plus agricultural advisor and all that sort of thing rolled into one. Do a survey of the estate, make recommendations where all the improvements could be carried out. And one copy has survived, which we still have. The Radnorshire Society have it in their library. And it is a fascinating handwritten document, beautifully written by Leighton Cook. And it did have a map with it, which has got separated, but we do have a map of that time as well. So they were agricultural improvers, and to do that you had to run the estate efficiently. So it was considered that if you had all your tradesmen in one place, you would be able to develop properly. So at that end was the smithy. That house is known as the smithy, that's what it's called. So the blacksmith was there. He would have been making all the ironwork for the estate, everything from screws and nails up to brackets, hinges, cart fittings, rims for the wheels, and etc., etc. The estate had to be self-sufficient. Also within that row was the cordwainer, who was both a harness maker and the cobbler, really, making boots and shoes. There was nowhere else to get any boots and shoes for miles around. So a number of trades were represented there. As well as that, there was the parish poorhouse, which sounds a bit patronising by modern terms, politically incorrect. Of course, there was no social services, no social security in the early part of the the 19th century. So there was a very small, basically one room up, one room down, residence within that long row. And that went to somebody who was basically destitute and couldn't have a home anyhow else. So that's the sort of social services side of the estate as well. Then just at the end of this entry up here stood the mill, the Abbeycwmhir mill. And that was probably on that site for hundreds of years, because almost certainly we're at the back of the monastery here. That was where the monastic mill was located right from the early days, and there was evidence. We found some good parch marks in 2018. It was actually better than this summer, of a building there, which was probably the drying kiln for the grain and so on. So that mill was functioning in its various manifestations right up into the 20th century, and was finally demolished in 1996. So it was an important feature of the monastic life of the community, and also obviously the later life. The mill didn't do a full-time job. He rented the mill, actually. He was a tenant to the mill, so it was up to him to run the mill as a business. But he had about 25 acres of land on the hillside above here, which he farmed as well, both as a subsistence farming at various times, and also sell some of the crop off to make a profit as well. So it was always fairly businesslike. And if you look at other mills in the area, in this part in Radnorshire, they all operated on the same way. When I first started looking at it, well, why has this miller got 35 acres of land? And the penny dropped that he wasn't milling full time. He was only milling part of the year and had to make a living at other times. So land came with the mill. So it was a great loss to the village. But so the rest of the row, we were seeing about half of it there. So the other half, because if you want to wander just down to the corner and have a look, that's no reason why you shouldn't. And then we will go through the farm field gate here and walk back up onto the Abbey.